Welcome back to the Georgia Show. It's great to have Bill Quinn, aka Q, back with us in the saddle. Thanks for coming on, Bill. I know you've been working hard on this series or this episode, so thanks for all that hard work. We are brought to you by the Georgia Record, georgiarecord.com. Sign up for our social media, sign up for our no-ad subscriptions. Help us out with the revenue that we can count on every week or every month, I should say. You get access to the entire network with no ads. We're getting a lot of good feedback on that, a lot of good signups. It's great to see. It's very helpful. So please continue with that. A lot of other coverage around the world, not just Georgia. So check that out. CDM1 on the Rumble. Sign up for YouTube. And I want to ask that you just take a look at whatfinger.news or whatfinger.com once a day after you look at cdm.press and the Georgia Record, of course, but put them in your daily scan. Great aggregator. And I want to say hello to the chat. Everybody's cleared hot in the chat. Love the comments and the engagement. Bill, what does the show look like today?
Well, we're going to talk about some of the stuff that has been emerging this past week. I came back the first time last Sunday, and then within 24 hours, we have got bombs going off across Georgia with regard to a key financial firm that has apparently been failed and seized. The people wrapped around that also overlap the Georgia GOP and GRA and their influence across Georgia, along with the remaining problems and concerns surrounding the Georgia GOP and some fascinating developments that have happened there. So we got a bunch, and it is almost all Georgia. As you said, it's good to be back, but boy, when you jump back in and you were in the middle of a firefight, boy, way to go.
Guns blazing. Well, let's get going, Bill.
All right, sounds good. Well, let's talk about the theme for the show. So we're calling this the cost of avarice, and I know that's not a word that people use very often, but in this case, it seemed to be appropriate. What is avarice? Well, avarice is extreme greed for wealth or material gain. And in this case, I'm taking a little bit of poetic license, and I will include wealth, material gain, and material power. And we saw so many unusual things that have come out now, both that have been happening apparently for a while, but also that happened in the last 3 weeks at the Georgia GOP convention here in Georgia. I just could not ignore this one. So we're going to talk in depth about some stuff that was reported this week. We will name names. We will go through what seems to have happened. These are, if there are quote unquote crimes that are being alleged, they're being alleged by others. We will simply report the facts as they have come out. So on June 27th, just a little over a week ago, First Liberty, which is a firm owned by the Frost family, including Brant Frost IV and Brant Frost V, and I guess other members of the family, was apparently seized on Friday and stopped operations. And on their website, early afternoon, there was a notice posted stating that, and basically telling constituents there will be no further communication from any employee of First Liberty, and we hope to have an orderly wind down, I think is what they call it, or wind up of the business, meaning it's being shut down or is now shut down at the behest of federal authorities. We have heard that likely includes representatives of the SEC, but also includes representatives from the FBI. And in fact, we're going to show how, if there are folks listening or folks who that may have been victims or caught up in what we're going to describe, we're going to give you the address at the FBI that they can contact to raise their hand and be recognized as one of the folks that may have been harmed in this. So this is a picture of the Frost family. There's two people in the middle that apparently are not members of the family. But for more on all of this, before we continue too much further, we've got two articles already up on the Georgia Record, georgiarecord.com. One you'll see with the First Liberty logo. Thank you for putting that up when I was still out, Todd. But we got it up. We I think scooped everybody, including national, and we're able to get out the word literally within minutes of the actual notification going up. And then in the following couple of days, we published.
Let me jump in real quick.
Sure.
You said scooped national. It's just now getting to the national press. I think over this next week, you're going to see a lot of disclosure in the national press on this.
Well, I hope so. I hope so. But I wanted to make sure that you knew we acted so quickly. You acted so quickly that we actually, we didn't take credit for it in the title, but we probably should have. Should have been exclusive breaking. So in any case, there's a second article with more detail entitled "Updates: First Liberty Building and Loan Seized Friday, June 27th." Keep that date in mind as we go through this, because it will become more and more, I think, important to understand the dates involved in this as we go through it. So here's the family. On the right is Brant Frost the Fourth, also referred to by other podcasters and other people across the state as Papa Frost. Don't know how that got started, but there it is. His wife, Krista Frost, is next to him. And then there's I believe two daughters. I don't know the second daughter's name, but one of them is Katie Frost, who is the District 3 chairman, I understand, and is also known for making public comments regarding the Georgia GOP and Republican strategies, which we'll talk about that in a few minutes. On the left, you'll see Brant Frost the Fifth, and I believe that's his wife standing next to him. So that's the family, if you will. Here is Brant at an event, and the reason I picked this is I wanted to point out a couple things. People have focused on, well, McCoon got Trump's endorsement, so he must be a good guy. Well, as we learn more about what's going on here, I think the definition of good guy will evolve. But in addition, notice that both Brant Sr. and Brant Frost Jr. did end up getting a picture with Trump. So does that mean that they're guaranteed by Trump to be good guys? Well, I think folks can come to their own conclusions on that. The other thing I wanted to point out was something that I find quite egregious here, and we're going to come back to this as we go through this discussion as well. Look at the way that they portray this in the language of their announcement on the right-hand side. First Liberty wants to help you build your kingdom to the glory of God and the prosperity of your posterity. I think, in retrospect now, looking back, and as we learn about some of the things that have been said to people that put money with First Liberty, I find this troubling to the nth degree.
Well, there's a lot of that going on in Georgia, using God to push certain agendas.
There is, and this is one of the ways I want to tee this up, because we're going to see this again several times as we go through this discussion. But it is very troubling, and I believe it is it falls into the realm of using God's name in vain. Because if you look at it, it isn't just using God and Jesus and other words and curses. It also can be using them in inappropriate manners. And I believe this, in retrospect, will become seen as an inappropriate manner. That's my opinion. All right. So again, here is Brant Sr. and Brant Jr. This is the front page of what was their website. Now, if you go to it now, it is firstlibertyga.com. You will actually find the announcement that's been put up, I believe, by the federal authorities, stating that the company has been shut down and no further communication will be had, and that they'll be doing hopefully an organized wind-up of the business. But if you wish to see their website, you can find it by going to the Internet Archive, and specifically the Wayback Machine at the Internet Archive. Look up that URL for their website, and you can find all the pages that were there. They've been stored. It was very interesting. There were a number of people that backed it up in the last couple of months, and you can see that it's been backed up consistently over the past year or so. Why that happened, we don't know, but we're thankful that it has, because we're able to point out some things we think are important. So look at the quote, and this was their front page. We say yes, and this means to loans, certain types of loans, when the big banks say no. So at first, it seems like, well, gosh, what a nice thing. They're able to say yes when big banks say no. But with your background, Todd, when big banks say no, why would they do that?
Well, typically they go off a algorithmic credit profile, and there are cases when community banks can provide better service and get to know their customers more and provide loans. But this wasn't a bank, so I don't really. And I have to be honest, I didn't know a lot about this business, and I still don't. But we're trying to learn.
Yeah, we'll talk about it a little bit. My own impression was when big banks say no, they probably have a reason. And as you say, it may be that they're not looking at that market or something, but sometimes it might be because things don't meet their standards. And so again, looking back in retrospect, I wonder if this was a strange, sort of harbinger of, well, we say yes when big banks say no. Perhaps the right answer was no. So let me go to the next thing, and then I want to talk a little bit about the business as I understand it. So their promise for people putting money in their hands and they specifically said they didn't want to call it investments. One of their people that put money in First Liberty's hands reported that in speaking with what they called the compliance officer told them, the investor, that they didn't want to use the word investment. I believe the quote was, the SEC doesn't like us to use that word. And so they would use other things. But most notably, you're going to see this from some of the people that have gotten caught in this, or had their money caught up in it, I should say, to be clear. A lot of this is driven based on the endorsements that were given to First Liberty. Those endorsements came from folks like Eric Erickson, Hugh Hewitt, Tug Coward, who I'm not familiar with, and Charlie Kirk, but also John Fredericks. He is, we're going to show a video where he appears with Brent Frost. And so all of these seem to lend certain levels of credibility to people when their thinking was, well, should I put money with this firm? I don't know. They were promising a pretty high return level, 8% for investments beginning, I believe, at $25,000 and going up to 13% for larger amounts of investment placed with First Liberty. The business, as it's been described, has been largely providing certain types of loans, some called bridge loans, which are aimed at small businesses, which may have already been approved or may have been approved for SBA backed loans, but haven't actually secured the full loan yet, and they need money for whatever purpose, whether it be for working capital or something else. And First Liberty espoused providing such bridge loans and then earning a higher level of return for those types of loans and providing that back to folks that were placing money in their hands. There's lots of question around exactly how this worked. What would happen, for example, if one of the small businesses, which even if they had an SBA approval, what if they failed to secure an actual loan to then pay off the bridge loan? Well, at least one of these folks that placed money here said that they were told, well, First Liberty would pay it out of their own funds if they had to, if something defaulted. So we'll see more of that in some of the comments we're going to show in just a couple of minutes. But keep in mind, as we go through this, the folks that decided to invest here or place their money, I should avoid using, I guess, the word investment. The folks that chose to put their money in First Liberty's hands did so as a function of both what they were told by First Liberty's employees and officers and based on their impressions gained from folks in the media. And I know that you have spoken of some of the folks that we talked to and have noted that certain vetting has been done to make sure that there's background that can be substantiated on even the folks that
That is true. CDM vets all its sponsors, and we're very proud of them, and we haven't had an issue yet. I will say that my time on the street, a 13% guaranteed is usually something that goes belly up. I mean, that's just a rule of thumb. That's just too good to be true.
It seems exorbitant, and it goes back to the old saying that's, I guess, we have to drop back to, which is, if it seems too good to be true, it probably is. Okay, so here's a bit more data on First Liberty. Now, they called them First Liberty notes, not investments. And again, they were aimed or claimed to be aimed at small businesses. We don't know what prompted, at least as we sit here today, we do not know what prompted this action from federal authorities. And I'm using that term because, again, we don't know the interplay between who actually took first action and what parts are enforcement, what parts are investigation. But federal authorities nonetheless are involved. Again, they claim to be able to have folks that were placing money with them earn 8 to 13%, 12-month terms. Many people have reported for a while it looked fine. And they claim that they've got $100 million in loans funded. Now, is it less than that? Is it more than that? We don't know. But $100 million, based on just some of the first things we're hearing, seems like a pretty reachable number, depending on how many folks placed money with First Liberty. So all of these are important. As we go through this, one of the things to keep your eyeballs on is that what were some of the folks that placed their money there. We believe it's going to come from several different groups. But let's talk about who's doing some of the local reporting on this that we find very valuable. So the Noonan Times Herald, led by Clay Neely, has done a very good job, we find, in looking at who's been potentially caught up in this as folks that place money there. Some of the more detailed areas of what's been discovered or what's being discovered day by day now. And so we give them a lot of credit for the reporting. We recommend that folks, if they want to know about more of the victims that are being reported, or alleged victims, I guess we'll say, that they take at least a look at this. And again, we commend Noonan Times Herald for the reporting on this. Let's take a look at a couple of things that they've brought out. So John Vander, I believe it's pronounced Wheel, is a gentleman that lives in Sandy Springs and is one of the folks covered in their reporting. He first heard about First Liberty through ads on WSB's Eric Erickson show. So again, a non-insignificant portion of people's impressions have been driven based on those promoting First Liberty. The Frost family, who operated the Noonan-based private lending firm, presented themselves, according to this person, as conservative, church-going, small business advocates. Sounded safe, especially with the endorsements from radio hosts he had long followed, Mr. Wheel had followed. He also reports, they told me they were Sunday school teachers and churchgoers. Now, keep in mind the dates. On June 17th, Mr. Wheel wired $25,000 to First Liberty, June 17th. He was drawn by an advertised 8% annual return for investments between $25,000 and $50,000. The firm's pitch promised even higher yields, up to 13%, for larger sums. So June 17th, when was the company closed down? The 27th, 10 days later. So a day later, he received a brief email confirming that he transferred the $25,000. But when he requested formal documents, replies slowed, according to this report. By late June, literally 10 days later, with no paperwork in hand, Mr. Wheel began to worry. Then last Monday night, Frost the fourth, the senior, if you will, called him out of the blue and with devastating news, the company had collapsed. So between the date that he submitted funds and the date the company collapsed, it was 10 days.
So they were advertising up, whether they knew the feds were going to seize the business is to be, known down the road. But, in college, I was at a gym and we paid monthly business, monthly subscriptions. And they sent out a letter saying, if you pay for the rest of the year, we'll cut it in half. And then, everybody pays to get the better price. And then they go bankrupt next week, so that's the worry here. We don't know if that's the case, but were they advertising to get funds in to stay afloat or what?
Yes, we don't know that as we sit here, but it is worrying. It's funny you should bring up the gym example. Literally, just last month, next to a restaurant that my wife and I frequent, we saw a gym with a large moving truck out front, taking all the equipment out and taking the signs off the front of the building. But guess what's sitting out by the road? Oh, ante up today for our best year-end discounts.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
Literally sitting out by the road at the same time. So they too were apparently taking money up until the time that something bad happened.
Yeah.
So
That's what I'd like to know. I'd like to know how the last 30 days went down, if we
that's
ever will
correct.
know, you know.
That's well, you don't know. This will likely be at least in part court proceedings, and so many of those you would think and hope would end up being wholly or partly public, based on the documents at least. So here's another example. Judy Stanton and her husband. I'm using the names because they were already published in the Noonan Times-Herald. They are senior citizens in Gwinnett County, and they have now had $450,000 tied up with First Liberty. And they are concerned that, in fact, it's gone. They stated that they first invested $150,000 last October. Also, after hearing Erickson promote the company on radio and say he, meaning Eric Erickson, knew the Frost family personally. In March, she said Brant Frost, the fourth, contacted them directly about a memory care project, which I believe is memory care would be a business to help folks with memory challenges associated perhaps with Alzheimer's and other things. Memory project in Athens, and they invested another $150,000 and then added a final $150,000 in April, just weeks before the firm collapsed. Again, April is only 2 months ago. $450,000. And this is one couple. Now, keep in mind that number that we saw earlier, $100 million. Well, here's $500,000 or very, very close to it from one single couple. How many folks have been caught in this? We don't know. We don't know as we sit here today. We hope that it's limited, but the writing on the wall suggests that it could be broader than we hope. In an email sent June 30th, just weeks before the June 10th, pardon me, June 10th, just weeks before the collapse, Brant Frost IV again encouraged an existing investor to deploy more funds, citing the company's very strong loan demand and new business startup requests. June 10th, that is 17 days before they were shut down. First Liberty was then seized and closed Friday, June 27th, according to the notice placed on their website. And there is the notice. We've published it in those two articles we cited a few minutes ago. If you want to read it, please go to those articles and you'll be able to read it. You can also go to their website, and it's still up, and it will be for probably the foreseeable future. But again, the point here that we're trying to make is, one, there seem to be claims that are now in retrospect troubling, and there seem to be timings that, as you said, call certainly the intent and knowledge at a given point in time into question. We're not saying that we know what that knowledge was, but we're not going to pretend that it isn't concerning. For folks that believe they may have been caught up in this, here, according to, again, the information that we've been privy to, is a first place to log information about what you believe may have happened. tips.fbi.gov/home. It's an online website, obviously. They do note, please only submit your information once. You can pretty much be assured they're looking at these as they go in. And as we learn more about where folks may need to interface to either make themselves available if they have information that could be helpful, or to make it known that they believe they have been harmed in this. This is one of the first places we would recommend folks go. So we expect that we will see more of this as we go forward in terms of actions. I want to underscore this notion of people relying on folks' endorsements. I'm going to play something that's nearly a year old now, but in it, you can hear Brant Frost talk about new people that can now place their money into First Liberty for these 8 to 13% returns. And he is on a what appears to be a promotional video along with John Fredericks. Here it is.
Let's have you with us. I got Hung Cow coming up. Just want to finish here with Brant Frost. By the way, he's also the chairman of Coweta County, Georgia, and one of the principals of First Liberty GA. Go to firstlibertyga.com. They're in the commercial lending business, but they have a new program now. Minimum of a $25,000 investment, you can get up to a 13% return. Now you have to be an accredited investor, and they have done this for a long time, making a lot of people money, but they've done it privately. Now we've urged them to open this up to those that participate in the Patriot economy. Brant, in about 2 minutes, sum up what this program is. If I've got $25,000 and I'm an accredited investor and I invested in your bridge loan company, part of the Patriot economy, I can get up to 13%. Just explain that quickly.
Excited to offer this now to your listeners and viewers and to the folks in the Patriot economy. We're advertising this now across the country. It's very simple. For years, we have been funding this program in-house with our own money and some friends and family, but now we're offering this to our fellow Patriots. If you want to make a very good return on your money, and if you want to participate in the Patriot economy and get Wall Street returns for Main Street investors, we would love to talk with you. Go to firstlibertyga.com. Just take a look at it. Give us a call, fill out the little form, and we'll reach out to you. We'll explain exactly the criteria. There is some criteria. This is not like a treasury or a government thing. There is some requirements. Obviously, there is some risk too. But we've got over a decade of experience doing these programs, doing these loans, over $100 million in loans we've made. And we have some great testimonials on the website from some folks who've been with us for a long, long time. It's one of the great pleasures and honors in our business to be able to help Patriot across the country. We've got retired teachers, we've got retired businessmen, we've got retired ministers who have been part of this program, as well as doctors, lawyers, everyone else you can imagine. We would love to have you as part of that. Go to firstlibertyga.com, take a look at it, see if it's a good fit for you. For as little as $25,000, you can join us. You do have to be an accredited investor, and go to the website and find out more about that. We would love to have y'all join with us. This is how we grow the Patriot economy. You've seen this all across the country. New companies starting up, new firms starting up. We're a 30-year-old firm, but this is the first time we're offering this option to the public. Up until now, it's been, we kept it close to the vest, but now we'd like to share in these opportunities with all of our Patriot brothers and sisters across the country. Go to firstlibertyga.com, see if we can help you earn up to 13% a year on your money.
Okay, so let me call out one thing that you heard earlier in that video. John Frederick said, "We have urged." That's different than "let me have an advertiser speak to you." That sounds like much more of a promotion to me. So, we are concerned that that folks have been caught up in this, and they've been relying on folks and their statements as part of their thinking in making this choice. So again, we're noting that at this stage. The other thing that we can look at is Brant Frost has a track record saying things that in retrospect turn out not to be true. He was on with John Gordon during the 2024 GOP convention. I think he went upstairs to do the broadcast and made some statements regarding Hank Sullivan and one of Hank Sullivan's publications that have turned out not to be true. But in addition, he made some statements about facts regarding an event that are contrary to pictorial evidence from that and from Hank Sullivan's post. We thought we'd play this. It's only about a minute and a half long. But again, you have to judge people based on what they say and whether they say truthful statements or whether they appear to be creating a narrative to change what people's opinions are. Let's look at John Gordon's discussion with Brant.
He thinks that the whole process violated the bylaws of Georgia GOP Inc. and that therefore the removal is not valid. What do you think?
He's wrong. Hank's an old friend, but he lied and slandered the Fraternal Order of Eagles that was the event center. They are probably going to sue him. So if I were Hank Sullivan, I'd be a lot more worried about having to defend myself against a libel suit.
Well, what about truth as the ultimate defense? I mean, what did he say that was libelous?
Well, they're going to probably send him a letter, and the process is going to start. But yeah,
but you said that he libeled him. How did he libel him? What did he say that was untruthful?
He led people to believe that they were having parties at that event where child sex trafficking was being parodied, and that was not the case at all.
I never read anything that Hank said that inferred that there was child sex trafficking. I think I've read all of his Substacks. Brant, I don't think that is remotely true. He did show. What he did. That's right. Go ahead. You say it.
He had a picture with the faces blurred out that looked like there were children in a cage. It was a toy. It was a Halloween party for kids, one of those haunted houses. And they had the little pretend jail, a little fake jail, a little wood crate, and the kids were smiling. And so this is from one of those open houses they do for Halloween.
Were they real kids or were they dolls?
No, these were kids, real kids going through with their parents.
Well, that's not. I mean, so he showed the pictures. You think that's libelous? It actually happened, right?
No, the way they did it.
There were children in cages at that Halloween party. I saw them. I thought they looked creepy.
I'll just say
that's not libelous. That's just fact.
Hank is probably going to get sued. He's going to deserve it. He was my friend once, but the scripture says he who, when someone does something like this, you go to them privately, and if they do not repent, you treat them as you would a pagan or a tax collector. That's Hank Sullivan in my book until he issues a retraction for the way he led people to believe something's terrible at an organization which.
So a couple things there. One is, again, he's recasting Hank Sullivan and what he said in words that were not used. And John Gordon calls him out on it. Two, he describes things contrary to the pictorial evidence. I didn't see any crates. I saw cages. And in fact, those were cages. They looked like dog cages. And so, trying to portray this, and then on top of it, seems to be trying to quote scripture, but I'm not familiar with that particular part of scripture. I just found the whole thing distressing and troubling. So just more example of, we have to be very careful when folks say certain things, especially when they're tied up in some of these other circumstances. We have to be very careful of what people are saying, and we have to think it through and check it, and we will find out the truth if we do so, I think. Okay.
Let's take a quick break here and pay some bills. I'm going to run an ad from the Wellness Company and one more sponsor. Stay with us.
That's it.
I did it again. Oh my goodness.
That's okay.
Oh my, here we go.
Well, in the case of hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin, these are two medications that have been FDA approved for use in humans for decades. They are very, very inexpensive. Interestingly, available over the counter in almost every other country other than the US and Canada. You can just walk into a pharmacy and buy them like we buy Tylenol in much of the world because they're that safe. And we've known for decades that ivermectin has very strong antiviral properties. It has anti-inflammatory properties, and both ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine are what we call zinc ionophores. They help to move zinc from the bloodstream into the cell, which is where it needs to be in order to fight off a virus. So lots of application for these, and we have every reason to believe that those drugs also will likely have some efficacy against H5N1 or a number of other respiratory viruses that we may meet down the road.
So also, I want to just highlight CDM Nutrition. Go there and check out the Nucleo Boost. This is a product that's been developed with John B. Wells and his team. It's fantastic. It is 1 scoop a day in yogurt or in a smoothie, and you get all of the nutrition you need at the cellular level. You get the BioAllo to inject it into your cells. And it's really like filling in the potholes of what your body needs nutritionally. So cdmnutrition.com. Check out the monthly subscription. It's cheaper. But back to you, Bill.
Okay. All right. We have a special guest with us today, David Cross. Let me bring in David. Hey, Dave. Thank you for making time. Okay? Yep, we're good. Thank you. Perfect. So we're what, 3 weeks out from the convention now. Let's see. I'm looking for Todd. Can you pull down the moniker there on the bottom?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry about that.
Thank you. No worries. We're about 3 weeks or 4 weeks out from the convention from hell, I guess is what we're going to start calling it. Yesterday, and I haven't seen the entire thing yet, but I understand that even John Gordon himself has now started really getting dialed down on what's going on with the Republican Party, especially here in Georgia, as probably well he should. And you've experienced this directly. So one, I wanted to, now that we've had a couple of weeks, 3 weeks to decompress and think through, bring us up to speed on what's happened, what you've done, what teams have done, and so forth, so folks can get a sense of where we're at as we sit here today, please.
Sure. So, immediately after the convention, I actually took 1 day off on the 9th. That was my wife's birthday, and we spent some time together then, and then we dove in, that week. And the whole point was we're collecting data, collecting evidence, collecting statements from people that, for folks that were saying, hey, I went to this convention, it was totally rigged. And, and we started reaching out to the Georgia GOP, the RNC, President Trump, Vice President Vance, and Susie Wiles, among other folks. And the whole point was to try and draw attention to the fact that this election was rigged. Yet again, we were subjected to using electronic devices to count the ballots, because everybody, all the detractors say, oh, it takes so long to count the ballots, it's going to take forever, and that kind of thing. And one of the things that's key to the whole reason why people wanted to have paper ballots is because you shouldn't have your ballot counted in secret. And when your vote is being processed, through a computer, it's being counted in secret, and anything can happen, in that time. We started learning about some of the things that happened. We learned that the sergeant at arms were divided into two groups. You had a pro-Josh group and a pro-Cross group. And the pro-Josh people had a totally different communication signal than the pro-David people. They should have all been working together as one cohesive unit, but that's not the way that this thing was planned out. Saturday morning, there was a secret meeting that happened at 5 a.m., a breakfast meeting that involved Brant Frost and Josh McCoon and a software engineer who is proficient on the Linux system, which is the software language that's used to run these machines. Things like that, should not happen. I mean, you get to the point where there are no coincidences that are going on. So there's a huge amount to uncover. I had a conversation with David Schaefer, several days afterwards, and he said, well, David, you knew that they were going to do everything they possibly could to stop you. And I said, David, I kind of anticipated that, but I thought that we were going to have, an honorable contest, put two gladiators out, out there on the field. put two gladiators out there in the field and let them, let them duke it out. Let the people decide, who's the better warrior.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, what we had was, Brant Frost was on there blocking microphones. He controlled which microphones were turned on or turned off. The convention chairman was a friend of his family, and he goes out there and says, well, we just did politics better. If this was baseball and you corked the bats and you had pine tar on the baseballs and the umpire was in your pocket.
You mentioned Gladiator. It reminds me of the scene in the end of the first movie where it's a contest in front of the whole public, but he goes and stabs the guy in the back before.
Exactly.
So that's exactly kind of the feeling I get.
Yeah. And so that's what's been going on. One really interesting thing that happened out of this was, I never signed the NDA. So I've got lists of Republicans from all over the state. I think I've got like upwards of like 9,000 people are on my list. But I did have a much narrower list of people that I think went to the convention. And so I sent out a survey to those people, and 260 people responded. Out of the 260 people that responded, almost all of them attended the convention. What is bizarre is that 88.3% of them said it was rigged, it wasn't fair. And I've even got people that didn't vote for me, voted for Josh. One guy said, in his comments, he said, my side cheated and I'm disgusted. And so he and I've actually, started a relationship. He's a county chairman, and he said, he said, I thought that we were the party of truth and honor, and he said, and clearly we're not, and we need to fix that. So there's a lot of things that are going on right now. There's a lot of moving parts. I've really encouraged people, to share their story by sending an email to council@gop.com. And you can share, your story. If you've got video, you can send it to me, you can send it to them. And we can also be reaching out to Amy Kramer. Amy is a friend of mine. She is the national committee woman for the RNC for the Georgia GOP. And kind of what her job is to do is her job is to be the liaison between the Georgia GOP and the national organization. So I know that we're probably going to inundate her with too many letters and emails and things like that, but that's really her ammunition that she can then, gather up and go to the RNC, go to Michael Watley, these other people up there, and go, here it is. And she can very clearly say that she was there, she witnessed it, she experienced it. Her daughter ran for a position, and it was rigged. I mean, it was totally rigged. And I'm just so excited right now that President Trump, has got things sorted out, pretty much, in between Iran and Israel. And he's got the big, beautiful bill is now passed. And now he said he's shifting his cannons, over to election security. And I hope he blows the hole through Georgia.
Yeah. I found it fascinating that, sometimes timing is so critical in all of this that you can't mistake it seems like a coincidence, but I doubt it is. In the midst of all of this, then all of a sudden there's talk again of don't believe that the parties are as you believe them to be. You're really dealing with a uniparty. And one of the things that I found, I didn't put it in our deck for today, but I will probably put it in an article, is a post by Elon Musk showing the debt, the rise of the national debt. It's just marched along, whether we had a Democrat or a Republican administration. It has continued to march up to the point where we're now over 37 trillion, and it's not really slowing yet. Doesn't appear to be. But the point was that people have counted on their party to change this or to do something different, and it hasn't happened. And Elon's point is, you don't realize you essentially have been masquerading, or these people have been masquerading as two different things when they're really doing the same things in many cases.
Yeah.
I find that particularly to the point here in Georgia. We've seen unbelievable things done at the convention and before and now after. And it looks like, the same kinds of unfeeling, inappropriate conduct that you would
Right.
expect from the bad guys. And now the question is, well, who are the bad guys?
Listen, I think I broke it down for people, on here and maybe other places. For anybody who's a new listener, you've probably heard these terms, grassroots and establishment. And the easiest way to discern these two groups of people in the Republican Party is establishment people aren't necessarily folks that have just been around for a long time, right? You can have grassroots people that have been around for a long time. Establishment people, what they care about is they care about title, position, power, and and perceived power. So there's a guy named Dennis Futch that's down in South Georgia. He sent me an email, I don't know, a couple weeks ago, and when it came to me, he had 4 titles underneath his name. That is clearly somebody who values title and position. You can call me dog catcher. I don't care. Yeah. And when you talk with somebody like Elon Musk, he doesn't care whether or not he's called the CEO or anything like that. What he cares about is making a product that's going to make a difference.
He cares about results and things happening that he wants to happen.
Yeah, results is what matters. So establishment people, again, it's people that care about position, title, power, the perception. Right?
And that's usually insecurity, extremely insecurity.
Exactly.
All these titles.
And then you have the grassroots people. Mm-hmm. And grassroots people, it's really simple. They care about God and country. The end. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't matter if they're rich, poor, young, old, been in the party for a long time, or they just started last week. Their core value is I care about God and country, not title and position. So this battle was all about that. I mean, you had this Frost family was out there trying to destroy my business. They were calling me a liar. They were saying, "Oh, you got fired from Merrill Lynch because of malfeasance or anything like that. How can we trust you?" and that kind of thing. I got fired from Merrill Lynch because I sent my client a letter that the firm disagreed with, and all it did was tell her how much income was coming in, each month. I would do it 100 times over, and getting fired from Merrill Lynch was actually one of the best things that ever happened to me. The same way that when Steve Jobs was fired from Apple, it was probably the best thing that ever happened to him too. Lee Iacocca was the same way. These people came back stronger and tougher and smarter, and they did things way better. I'm in the I feel like I'm the same way. I never signed that NDA list because one of the key features that was in it was not the not sharing of information. I'm in the business of keeping my clients' information secret. I use multiple layers of security in order to accomplish that. The thing that mattered on that non-disclosure agreement was the fact that I could be sued for non-disparagement, which means not saying nice things. So if I was, all the times that I was pointing out, when the chairman was using the company credit card for personal purchases, that's considered disparagement. So I could have been, if I had signed that document, every time I opened my mouth and said that, it would have been a $25,000 predetermined fine.
You've just caused me to think, because I put out an article this morning that what did Josh know and when did he know it? I mean, I have no proof. I don't know this is even remotely true, but what if they knew this was going to go down and they were trying to block any disparagement, with the NDA?
I don't know. I think what this thing was all about was, I originally thought that the reason why the Frost family was so vindictive, to me, was because I beat their star son, 2 years ago in 2023, whipped his ass. It wasn't even close, and I was supposed to lose. I was supposed to lose by a country mile, and I whipped his ass. And I thought that he was really upset about that. As it turns out, them cheating and rigging this thing was an act of self-preservation. These people knew that I was going to really clamp down and limit their impact and exposure to Republicans.
Mm-hmm.
They could not have that. You played that video a couple, from last summer where Brandt was talking about, we're opening this up and taking $25,000. And by the way, you have to be an accredited investor. Mm. An accredited investor is somebody who has $1 million or more of net worth and has made $200,000 per year if they're single for the last 2 years, or $300,000 per year for the last 2 years if they're married. That is not a retired school teacher. That is not a retired preacher. That's a very small subset of people that are out there in the world that can invest. And when you start hearing things like, we only deal with big people, but we'll take your $25,000, you need to run for the hills. Yeah. Because this is, when I saw him advertising, I reached out to the Secretary of State's office and said, hey, is this company set up to sell securities like this? And they responded back and said no. And I said, well, I think you've got somebody who's selling unregistered securities. And I think that began the investigation. I think they looked into things, and I think they kicked it up to the feds. And my understanding is that Papa Frost, when he was making his telephone, calls of absolution out there to tell people that they lost everything, and believe me, they lost everything. He was out there, telling people that I know, this is happening because of David Cross. Your buddy David Cross made this happen. And one of my friends said, no. This is happening because you broke the law.
Well, that's okay, Bernie.
David Cross can't write a sternly worded letter to the Secretary of State or to the SEC, and they're going to come down and seize your business. I've been doing this for 34 years.
As I recall, Bernie Madoff was famous for blaming everybody else too.
Yeah, when they seize your business, there's not a do-over. You're not getting it back. It's over. It's not an accident. When the feds come in and do something like that, they've got you dead to rights. The end. And the thing that's going to happen is this is going to go on for like a couple of years, where the details are going to be coming out, little by little. But the fact that Brandt Frost the younger was dealing with people's interest payments and taking deposits and that kind of thing and advertising for it, it's repugnant. It's repugnant. That they were out there extolling the virtues, of their business and aligning it with God. Give me a break.
Yeah. Well, one of the things we haven't even talked about yet is their compliance officer. And I don't have his name in front of me at the moment, so I'm not going to say it. But
there is one.
Huh?
I'm surprised there is one.
Well, yeah, it's very interesting. But guess what? Turns out he is a local pastor at a church, and was himself apparently caught up in an investigation several years ago prior to all of this. So you begin to delve into this, and it gets worse looking, not better.
Right.
You mentioned that, folks that they said, you have to be an accredited investor. But going back to that publication I mentioned earlier, the Noonan Times Herald, they have already talked about folks that I believe one couple was retirees from a hospital. They wouldn't be set up as accredited investors, I don't believe. And others, there's been other stories of folks that, they may have lost everything. And you're talking about people that are senior, that probably don't have may not have other things to rely on. It's troubling to the point of tears. And that, I believe, is the true tragedy of this. People are caught up. These are people's lives that may have been destroyed by this, over and above just the legal implications for the folks that caused it.
Well, let me just say that, a retiree can be definitely an accredited investor if they have assets, but
they could, sure. Yes.
They can, but typically when you're doing offerings to accredited investors, a lot of times, the minimum purchase is going to be like $500,000 or $250,000. It's a much larger number than $25,000. $25,000 is taking grandma's bread money. That's what this thing was about. It was a mad scramble to get cash in the door because the thing was collapsing.
So
I also find it just disgusting, that picture that you showed where Brandt Frost and or Papa Frost and Brandt Frost were up there with President Trump doing a
I
thumbs
know.
up. And they were using that to advertise their business. I mean, it makes it look like it's legitimate. It makes it look like the president is saying, hey, these are good people. And the president has no idea that his picture was used for that.
Yep. Let me, if I can, one of the beauties, and again, I give credit to people all over Georgia. I've gotten so many calls, so many reach outs from folks, both with good wishes, but also now reporting information that is not readily available. I wanted to talk about a few of those. And it goes back to something you said just a minute ago, David. Part of this is a thirst for literally control and power over people. The impression that I got is people described more and more as, the bad guys arrived at this thing and said, okay, who do I get to be the boss of? Right. And I'll give you some examples. One, and I'm not going to name folks quite yet until I get a couple more things in writing, but I am going to name one, a notable one. There was the comment made the night before, Friday night, off site, that was overheard. Somebody in a position of some level of authority saying, oh yeah, we're going to be using the clickers tomorrow. Now, how would they know that?
Right.
How would they know that? Why would there be I believe there was a chairman of clicker management or something like that. Why wouldn't there be a chairman of paper ballot management? Because there was so much pressure and focus on paper ballots.
We had 50 people there ready to count paper ballots, do it on video so anybody could see, make it totally transparent. But Bill Consiglio, the morning before the convention even started, said, get ready to hand out the clickers. We're using clickers. So this thing's like it's like an octopus that's got, there's like tentacles all over the place. Yep. I don't know where it's going to end, but let me just remind everybody, the reason why this issue is so important, particularly right now, and why I am driving so hard about this, is because the Democrats are poised to defeat us. They are tripling and quadrupling down on the spend that they're going to do in Georgia in 2026. They are going to make fun of us, for everything that's going on with this. I had a plan to win the governor's office, to win the Senate, and to get to a supermajority in Georgia. And I had a 22-point plan in order to make that happen. Josh McCoon doesn't even have a plan.
Well, let me ask you, David, let's get into that, because that's really, really important. And I'm glad you brought that up, and we can go along here. But how do we fix this? How do we flip on a dime and try our best to do what we can in Georgia into 26? What is your recommendation?
Right now, it's to overturn this election, because right now we have got a bunch of people who are utterly beholden to the governor right now and controlled by the governor. And the voting system in Georgia, we're still voting on these damn machines that count the ballots in secret. And you nor I nor anybody else ever gets a chance to like pull out the actual paper ballots and count them against what the machine says. The only way that it's happened is on accident. And we have got to overturn this election. This is not for me. This is not for my ego or anything like that. This is for all of us that fought. In the first week, in the first few days after the election, I started scrambling and putting things together. And I had a few people that were saying, "Oh no, you just need to like chill out, give it a couple of days and see what's happening behind the scenes." And I said, absolutely not. I can't do that, because that dishonors the people that put in the effort, the time, the money, the talent, the treasure to try and help get real, true grassroots elected. And to this day, I still believe that the vote count was flipped. I don't think it was even close. I don't think it was close. I mean, if anybody with a pulse that was at this thing, you saw the number of boos that were happening when McCoon was on stage, when his speakers were up on stage. They were getting booed mercilessly. When I was backstage and the microphone and camera people were back there, they said, we've never heard anything like this before. You're going to slaughter this guy. And what's crazy is that when I was waiting backstage after Josh gave that horrendous speech that he gave with the the super booming video that you couldn't hear anything on, when it was all done, as the votes were being allegedly tabulated, a young black gentleman came over in an all black suit, stood right next to me, and the second that those numbers popped up on the screen, he pointed out and he said, "Mr. Cross, we need you to exit backstage." And I said, "Hey, Josh, no unity speech?" He didn't even crack a smile. Whether or not he heard me, I don't know. But normally you have the two candidates go on stage afterwards. And it was broadcast to everybody out there that I had no interest in going up there. I did. I totally had an interest. I was told you need to leave, immediately. So there's too many things that happen with this. But this is all about what can we do? You can write to the president. You can write to the RNC. You can write to Michael.
What was that email for the council again?
Council@gop.com.
Okay.
Or if you want to write to Mike Whatley, he's the chairman. You can write to M Whatley, WHATLEY, M Whatley @gop.com. Send him something. He's on Twitter. Ping him on Twitter. A couple friends of mine from Lumpkin County, cornered him last Friday at a Faith and Freedom Caucus meeting, and they gave him a piece of their mind and said, "You've got to look into this."
They actually gave him a letter that said all the issues with the thing, and one of those people said, "Mr. Whatley, we are in trouble in Georgia. We need your help. Please look into this," and literally take it. And apparently he did. But isn't that interesting? And then just a couple of days ago, you reported that you finally got a response from the RNC, didn't you?
Well, I got a very short response that basically said, "We got your message. We're looking into it." So what's going to come from it? I don't know yet. But I did respond back to them, and I said, "Hey, in the last 48 hours, there's been some significant developments where the people who rigged the election against me, their business was seized, for fraud." So hopefully that's going to have something, with it. But I mean, this whole thing right now about Elon Musk, starting the New American Party. I was thinking, kind of along the same lines. And the biggest issue there is that the critics are right. It is going to divide the party. But I will tell you this: I'm hearing that there's a lot of other states. There's several other states where they're going through the exact same thing that we're going through here in Georgia.
Yep.
And here's the thing: we can either rescue this thing or it's going to die.
So
I
want to state, I sent out a bunch of emails and requests for comment this week. Let me run down through some names. John Frederick said he didn't have a comment. He didn't know anything about the details. Fair enough. Steve Bannon said he didn't know anything about it. He asked if the Cross families were big donors to Trump. And I said, I'm not sure. He said he didn't know anything about it. I emailed Cox Media Group, Eric Erickson, and Turning Point USA, and have not heard anything back from them. That's been
it's remarkably quiet right now. And to me, what's really remarkably quiet too is the fact that Josh McCoon has not come out with any kind of statement of any kind of significance and said anything. I mean, he needs to eliminate, like yesterday, Katie Frost from being the chairman of the Financial Oversight Committee. And I think that the word oversight means literally to hey, let's look over all the garbage that's down here.
Well, we're in Atlas Shrugged territory now.
It's like putting a blind guy in charge of the Titanic, Yeah. Everything will be fine. Let's put the blind guy up front, right?
If I was the chairman, I would be saying, hey, the Frost family is going to be barred from the Republican Party forever. Anybody related with the Frost family. Katie Frost needs to be, removed from her position as the 3rd district chairman. Get her out of there. They need to be, this family needs to be pulled like a weed in the garden. I had said before that I thought that they were a cancer on the Georgia Republican Party, and people pilloried me, and were making fun of me. And it turns out I was right, so I'm getting some hats made that say Cross was right about everything. So those will be coming out here pretty soon.
I want one.
And you're building up quite a darn track record too,
I want one where on the air.
It's funny you would bring that up. I actually have that video, but now that you said it, we don't need it. But it is true. You know, when you say that, you know, it's funny when you say the truth based on your experience, it comes out to be proven over time in so many cases. And when these people spin these lies about, you know, oh, well, gosh, you know, we're going to be vindicated because, you know, God's going to step in and vindicate us. And then a week and a half later, this happens. It's like, well, that didn't have very good aging, did it? You know,
I think this is a lot like 2020 when Trump, I think, wanted to show the country what was really happening. I think you have a very similar situation here, and I think people need to stay involved because this is when the crack in the matrix happens, and you can drive a truck through it. That's what people need to get double down involved right now and get involved at your local level, in my opinion.
Yep, I agree.
Yep.
One more thing, and you kind of almost touched on it, David, and that is, you know, you can focus on the divides in the populace, and sometimes I believe that the media and the the elites sitting at the top like that, and they want to continue that. But at the end of the day, so many times, if you talk to the people, we the people, regardless of what letter comes after their name, they want the same things. They want, they want safety for the family. They want a decent job, a decent living condition. They want a chance at the American dream. And they want to feel like, they're accomplishing what they should in life. I believe the vast majority of Americans, regardless of what party or parties they may think they belong to, a lot of them really just want those things. And you see it again and again and again when people have talked to the outliers, the people with, that want, their sex changed or something else that's out on the periphery. They hear one thing, and the media have a tendency to focus on that. But at the end of the day, when you talk to regular people that are trying to make it through life and trying to be successful, trying to have their kids taken care of, they don't sound that different. And I'm wondering if, in line with what Elon and others are saying, we just have to realize that. Maybe it doesn't mean that, we give up the idea of even having parties, but maybe it does mean we give up the idea of somebody's got to be wrong every time. Maybe the vast majority are right. We just have to recognize that. And maybe they're right in different ways.
Right. Listen,
well, go ahead.
Like I said, I think there's a lot of work to do. I strongly encourage everybody to reach out. And if anybody who's watching this, if you ever hear me say something where you think, oh, Cross is full of it, he doesn't know what he's talking about, email me, dcross108@gmail or david.cross@us-am.com. Reach out to me. You can even direct message me on Twitter. I don't care. Contact me and say, what's your proof? Show me the proof. And you know what? Every single time I'll have it. Every single time.
You will. I've seen it. Every time you bring it out, every one of your emails, if you claim something, you've always got the receipts in there.
I have to. My business is built on trust and reputation. I mean, I'm in the investment business. If you tell lies to people, your business evaporates, like a fart in the wind. And I can't sustain, my family and take care of, my kids and my family and do the things that I need to do if my business is suffering. And the last thing that I'm ever going to do is tell people, tell people things that are not true. So reach out to me. I'll share any of it with you. Happy to do it.
That's great.
Well, I want just to give a highlight on the Skiff Monday through Friday, 10 to noon Eastern. We've been doing a big series on Christian persecution. We had a pastor from Woodbury, Connecticut. Fantastic. He's on our Rumble channel. You can find that there or on CDM. And we had Daniel Rhodes about Christianity being persecuted in Nigeria. And we're going to continue this. And we're going to have John Gordon on this week to talk about this whole situation. So stay tuned.
Well, that's great. Any last words, Todd?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Okay. David, thank you so much for being with us. I know we'll have more to report both on First Liberty and on the GOP, kerfuffles in
Orange
Georgia.
Baby, they're coming. Get ready.
That's right. And if you have other things, in the meantime, certainly bring them forward to us. We'll get them out. Thank you for being with us today, and we will look forward to seeing folks. I think we're gonna reignite Wednesdays, aren't we, Todd?
Works for me, my friend.
All right.
As long as the queue has the energy and the bandwidth, we're good to go.
Well, barring a shutdown on notable news, I think we'll find plenty of stuff to talk about.
All right. Take care.
All right. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.